Sound check 1 2 3. Sound check 1 2 3.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call this meeting of our Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee to order. A reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during our committee meetings. Please note that quorum is present. We'll start off with our roll call. If I can just ask everyone to acknowledge their presence as I go through the list. So Councillor Kretsch sends his regrets today. Karen Burke.
Present.
Graham Carroll.
Present.
Andrew Douglas sends his regrets. Lynn Lundstead.
Present.
Andy McLaren.
Present.
Stefan Spalnik.
Present.
Mr. Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda today?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have the following changes to the agenda. Under item 8, staff presentations, 8.1, the presentation for the Melville Street Heritage Conservation District study has been uploaded to the agenda. As well, item 8.3, recommendation to designate 21 to 25 Jones Street, Stony Creek, the powerhouse under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, PED 24137, Ward 2 has been withdrawn. And one added item under discussion items, item 10.1, demolition of 318 Hess Street South in Hamilton being a non-designated property listed on the Municipal Heritage Register, PED 24156, Ward 2.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
I see Karen and Graham.
And is there anyone opposed as we go to vote? Seeing none, that item is carried. Do we have any declarations of interest today? Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of our minutes from the previous meeting. We have before us the meeting minutes from July 22nd, 2024. May I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I see Lynn and Graham.
And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. Under communications, may I please have a mover and a seconder to put the communication items on the floor? We have item 5.1, which is correspondence from Ray Very respecting the Melville Street Heritage Conservation District study recommendation be received and referred to consideration of item 8.1. Do you have a mover and a seconder?
I see Stefan and Karen.
And is there any discussion in regards to that communication item? No questions? If not, we move to vote. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. 8.1 is our staff presentation. We begin with the Melville Street Heritage Conservation District study, PED 24140, Ward 13. We have Alyssa Golden, Cultural Heritage Planning Lead, is here to make a presentation. Welcome, Alyssa.
Thank you, Chair. Just pulling up my staff presentation. There we go. So Alyssa Golden, Cultural Heritage Program Lead. Excited to be able to present to you today the Melville Street Heritage Conservation District study. And I want to first start by thanking the consultants from MHBC, Rachel, who's on the call with us today in case there's any follow-up questions, Dan, Nick, and previously Stacy as well, for all their hard work on this HCD study, working with staff and integrating feedback from the community on what is the first new district study in the city of Hamilton since the year 2000. And recognizing that this is the first time that this committee is seeing an HCD study, and for the sake of our viewers who might be tuning in, I'm just going to go through, start with an introduction to what an HCD is, the district designation process, before going into the background on this project, a summary of the findings of MHBC's Melville Street HCD study report, which is attached as Appendix A to the staff report, and then the recommendations resulting from this study and next steps. So what is a heritage conservation district? Well, it's an area comprised of a concentration of heritage resources with a special character or historical association that distinguishes it from its surroundings. This could include residential, commercial, institutional, or industrial areas. It could include rural landscapes, potentially entire villages or hamlets, with features or land patterns that contribute to a cohesive sense of time and place. And designation helps a municipality manage and guide future change in a district through the adoption of a district plan with policies and guidelines for the conservation, protection, and enhancement of that area's special character. We do have 7 existing heritage conservation districts across the city of Hamilton, including one just east of the study area across Melville in Dundas. And as I mentioned, the last new heritage district was actually designated in the city of Hamilton in the year 2000. So there are 2 key parts to the district designation process, the study phase and the plan phase. And the HCD study phase confirms whether an area is worthy of being designated as a heritage district and provides some direction for next steps in the preparation of a district plan. And today, committee is considering the findings of the district study for the Melville Street area in Dundas. And there are 4 key components that are required to be included in an HCD study. This includes an assessment of the character of the study area to determine whether it should be protected as a district, identification of a proposed district boundary, objectives for a proposed district and its related plan moving forward, so what would it be trying to accomplish, and identification of any changes that might be required to other municipal policy and bylaws to ensure conformity with a future district plan. And consultation with Heritage Committee today on the findings of this HCD study is a part of that legislative process before staff can receive formal council direction on whether to proceed with preparing a district plan for Melville Street. And I'll speak more to the next steps at the end of the presentation, should council direct staff to proceed with that next step of preparing a plan. So recent amendments to the Ontario Heritage Act included the identification of new provincial criteria for designating heritage districts. It requires that at least 25% of properties within a proposed district boundary must satisfy at least 2 of the criteria in Ontario Regulation 906 in order to be eligible for district designation. And this committee would be familiar with these criteria, which can be broken down into 3 main categories: design physical value, historical associated value, and contextual value. And these closely align with the provincial criteria that we also use for individual Part 4 designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. On to some background on this particular district study project. So before this new district study was initiated, the city had actually started a new phase of its built heritage inventory strategy work in downtown Dundas. Initial work had been done to compile historic research and prepare a historic context statement for the area. And preliminary consultation also took place in the culling of a specific focus group in downtown Dundas to discuss its heritage. Then in the fall of 2022, Council passed a bylaw to formally direct staff to initiate a new heritage district for the area of Melville Street in Dundas. And this is just west of the existing Cross Melville Heritage District. That bylaw provided some interim protection for what was originally a study area that was much smaller, shown in light blue on the slide here. Staff then retained consultants, MHPC, to begin the district study in late 2022. And following their initial review of the study area, they actually recommended expanding it to the area shown in dark blue here on the slide to encompass the entire residential area west of the existing Cross Melville district. I'll also note that due to staff changes and restructuring around that time, the Dundas Built Heritage Inventory project was also put on hold. And just to give you some context of this Melville Street HCD study area, shown in red on the slide here, overlaid with the historic 1851 town map of Dundas, gives you an idea of just the scope of which the study is encompassing. And contextually, the area that staff were looking at as a part of the downtown Dundas Built Heritage Inventory is the entire town boundary, which is shown in sort of the purple here on the slide. So by summer 2023, a draft HCD study report had been prepared by MHPC and circulated for public comment. A public open house was held last June, in addition to an online survey, to gather feedback on the draft report. Postcards were delivered to the entire surrounding neighborhood to advertise the open house and the survey. And a summary of the feedback received during this engagement can be found starting on page 62 of MHPC's report, attached as Appendix A today. The final Melville Street HCD study report was circulated for public comment earlier this summer. Letters were sent to notify owners in the proposed district boundary, and an email sent to the project mailing list. And I will note that staff had requested formal comment on the study by July 26th, Staff did receive one letter of opposition from an owner in the proposed district boundary, which is attached as Appendix D to this report, and staff provided a response to the owner addressing their concerns, and a number of the other questions raised are also addressed as a part of this staff presentation. So public feedback on the draft HCD study was integrated into the final report. One key change reflected in the final report is the participants' preference for a larger district boundary. Shown on the slide here are the two options that were presented in the draft study and discussed at the open house, with the original consultant's recommendation actually being the smaller option, option 2 to the right. And what we heard from participants was their preference to protect a much larger area with a new district. The other key change is updated property evaluations. This includes the identification of two different categories of contributing properties, A and B, and this allowed us to capture the value of some more vernacular buildings that contribute to the historic character of the area, as well as capability to tailor different guidelines and policies in the future as a part of a plan to help manage change to these two types of contributing properties differently. Looking at these criteria for how we categorize properties, under those contributing A properties, these are generally properties that maybe are already protected heritage property, either through designation or an easement. Those with a high level of integrity of remaining heritage features that are also related to a representative style of architecture. They might be considered rare, unique, or early examples of a style, considered a landmark, have key landscape features, or have some specific historical associative value in addition to those other criteria. Those contributing B properties that were identified are generally representative of a more vernacular design that supports the character of the area, so something like a cottage. They're representative of maybe an architectural style but have less integrity of features that remain compared to those contributing A properties. They have supportive landscape features or have additional historical associative value related to the property. And shown here are some examples of what contributing A and B properties are within the proposed district. And what these evaluations look like across the entire study area that was looked at, there were 161 contributing A properties and 131 contributing B properties in the overall study area, and that for a total of just over 450 properties in total that were looked at. Based on these property evaluations and the final recommended district boundary is shown here, which, as I mentioned, encompasses the majority of the expanded study area that was reviewed by the consultants, with the exceptions of Witherspoon and Alma Streets to the north. And this reflects the public's preferred option 1 from the original draft report reviewed last year. So on to the property evaluations themselves and the criteria required to be met for district designation. It was found that at least 25% of the properties actually satisfy 3 or more provincial criteria, so that exceeds the 2 criteria that are required under Ontario Regulation 906. And the three main criteria that were met within the proposed district include criteria 1, which is around design physical value. 44% of the properties met that criteria. Criteria 5, related to historical associative value, 76% met that criteria. And then criteria 7, around contextual value, and 76% of the properties met this criteria. And then just to summarize, in addition to the legislative requirements around the 25% of properties, it's helpful to note that 76% of all the properties within the proposed district boundary shown here were identified as contributing heritage properties. So that's 250 of the 331 total properties. So based on the research and property evaluations, a character statement was developed by the consultants. This is also known as a statement of cultural heritage value or interest. And this helps identify and summarize the heritage value of the area. The full statement can be found starting on page 109 of the consultant's report attached as Appendix A. And in general, the Melville Street study area reflects a working class residential neighborhood of the Victorian and Edwardian eras, largely developed between 1880 and 1930. Primarily workers' housing was built, supporting Dundas's machine tool and cotton factories. It originally included a mix of rental housing for general laborers and skilled workers, as well as larger homes for notable local business people, and these were primarily located more towards the eastern end of the study area. Early surveys were guided by the topography of the escarpment and helped create the blueprint for what is the community today, including the early streets and circulation patterns. The predominant architectural styles include Queen Anne Revival, cottages, and Edwardian classicism. There's a prevalent use of red brick, which also is tied to the local brickyards that were there in the 19th century. There's concentrations of similar architectural styles and clusters of buildings with similar massing, scale, and material. And the early residents of the area were primarily Irish descent, tied to the Irish potato famine, as well as Scottish lowland, and this is also reflected in the early places of worship that can be found in the proposed district. The Melville Street HCD study report also includes a list of heritage attributes that demonstrate and contribute to the value outlined in that character statement. The full list of the attributes can be found on page 110 of the report attached as Appendix A, and I'll just go over them here. Generally, the heritage attributes of this proposed district area includes a concentration of buildings constructed between 1880 and 1830 with representative architectural styles, as well as supportive architecture constructed within that era. Building cladding primarily includes brick, stone, and historic stucco, generally massed between 1 to 2.5 stories. The pre-Confederation survey areas and their lotting patterns and streets are also heritage attributes, as well as the interrelationship between the historic dwellings, educational institutions, places of worship, and places of work. There's a collection of landmarks, including institutional buildings. A unique junction of Witherspoon Street, Victoria Street, and Market Street North is also identified as a heritage attribute. The narrow treed boulevard along Melville Street. The modest front yard landscaping, including low-lying plantings, hedgerows, and small fencing, as well as hardscaped walkways. And finally, narrow one laneway driveways with parking located to the rear. So one of the other requirements of an HC study is identifying, as I mentioned, objectives for a future district plan. Generally, district plans aim to maintain and conserve the cultural heritage character and heritage attributes of a designated area. The proposed objectives for the Melville Street HCD plan include maintaining that low-profile built form that I mentioned, so 1.5 to 2.5 stories, and looking to permit greater heights where it's compatible with larger district objectives. Supporting the existing uses and the appropriate adaptive reuse of existing heritage buildings, preventing demolition of existing buildings, natural features, or structures that are identified as contributing to the historic character of the proposed district, helping to facilitate appropriate, in other words, compatible and sympathetic, new development, infill, and alterations to the properties within the proposed district. And overall, these objectives would act as the starting point for developing policies and guidelines for managing change in a new district when a plan is being developed. And as I mentioned, there's a study and the plan phase in the district designation process. Shown here on the slide is the legislative process for the next steps with preparing a plan. There would be larger public owner consultation as a part of the development of the plan itself, but in terms of the legislative requirements, there would be a public meeting under the Ontario Heritage Act, as well as consultation with this Heritage Committee on an HD plan. Once receiving council direction to actually designate an HCD and adopt a plan, a bylaw would be passed, and formal notice of passing would be served on all the affected property owners, the Heritage Trust, as well as public notice being sent out, and that would initiate a 30-day objection period. Any objections to a designation bylaw having been passed for a new district would then be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And just finishing up with a summary of the staff recommendations. So how do we actually implement this new potential district? So the first set of recommendations here relate to the required direction and funding to actually proceed with preparing a new district plan. Recommendation A has the attached MHBC report received by council. Recommendation B would confirm the proposed boundary for a new district. Recommendation C of the staff report gives the formal direction for staff to actually proceed with preparing a district plan for the Melville Street area. Recommendation D just provides additional direction to ensure that we're consulting with property owners and this committee in the preparation of the district plan. And recommendation I relates to ensuring that we reallocate the necessary funds to actually prepare this plan. Also included in the staff recommendations in terms of ensuring that we have some interim protection for those properties identified as contributing within the proposed district boundary. Recommendation E would see the contributing properties identified on the slide here and identified in the appendices of the staff report listed on the Municipal Heritage Register, and this would provide interim protection while a plan is being prepared. And I know that this committee is very familiar with listing on the register, but for folks who might be listening, interim protection is provided by listing properties on the register. It does not prevent change from happening, but does require in order to give notice of intention to demolish. It can't prevent that demolition from happening, but can delay it for 60 days. And it gives hopefully staff time to discuss alternatives to demolition, and especially in the case here of preparing a new district plan, we want to be aware of any substantial demolitions or changes that might be happening within the proposed district. And in terms of the legislative process for that recommendation to list, should we get that council direction, staff will then provide notice of listing to all the affected property owners that are identified as contributing properties, and they would have the opportunity to object to that listing. And then there is another staff recommendation included in this report that has been discussed at this committee before. This report seemed like an appropriate time to bring forward the recommendation to actually disband the existing Cross Melville HCD Advisory Committee, since we are looking to create a new heritage district beside the existing district in Dundas. And these three recommendations here, F, G, and H of the staff report, would result in the existing Cross Melville Advisory Committee being disbanded, the terms of reference for the existing permit review subcommittee being amended to specifically include representation from the Cross Melville district. It's the only one that's not currently listed in the terms of reference for permit review. And then to have the one confirmed citizen-appointed member of the existing Cross Melville Advisory Committee appointed to that new position on the permit review subcommittee. So this would eliminate a redundancy in the heritage permit process while ensuring that we do have appropriate representation from Cross Melville, from the Cross Melville district in that process. And then next steps. So in terms of the Melville Street District itself, following consultation with committee here, these recommendations will then proceed to Planning Committee and Council for final decision and direction. Should we get approval from Council to proceed, we'll then issue notices to the owners of the contributing properties for listing on the Municipal Heritage Register. We'll retain consultants to begin preparing the HCD plan. That will involve consultation with property owners and this committee on the draft plan, and report back to council with recommendations for district designation and adoption of a plan. And then I'll also just note, as I've highlighted, this being the first new district study in over 20 years, really the need to develop a new citywide HCD strategy is more important than ever now. We are hoping to report back to Heritage Committee later this year on a citywide strategy. As you might recall, that was flagged as well as a part of the Bill 23 implementation report back in 2023. And as noted in the staff report, recent changes to the Planning Act implemented as a part of that Bill 23 have limited the city's ability to control design features of development through the site plan process. And this, in addition to some as-of-right zoning that helps permit much-needed intensification in existing neighborhoods, this could result in an increase in demolitions and new unsympathetic development in some of our historic neighborhoods. So the designation of new heritage conservation districts will allow the city to guide more compatible new development and facilitate intensification that's sympathetic to and enhances the historic character of these areas. Now, that was a lot of information. Thank you very much for listening, and happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
Thank you, Alyssa. That was a great presentation. Happy to see it starting to come forward after 20 years. It's a long time. Do we have any questions in regards to the presentation that was made today? Go ahead, Graham.
In regards to the appointment of a member to the Heritage Permit Review Subcommittee, what if the person that is currently the citizen member has no interest in anything outside of Cross Melville?
Great question through the chair to Graham. So staff have reached out to let that current appointed member know. We will be having some conversations to just speak about what the scope of involvement might be. Obviously, this is a very different scale than the Cross Melville specific advisory committee. But my understanding is if they decline the appointment, then there would be, when there's a next public call through the selection committee, there would be a new call made for that position on permit review.
Okay, I just worry about the composition may throw stuff off, and if there's nothing there for Dundas, the person doesn't attend, and we have quorum issues because they don't have an interest.
Through the chair, the addition of this position to Heritage Permit Review wouldn't affect quorum because the quorum amount is the same based on the current composition. So adding one more member doesn't increase the quorum by one.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Andy.
Through the chair, very good presentation, Melissa. I think I know the answer to this, but just for clarity, the new district that's being studied right now, is that actually going to create a new district, or is it merging with the existing Cross Melville, or are they going to be two separate districts within Dundas?
Through the chair to Andy, yes, that's a great question. So it is touched on in the consultant's report. This recommendation is for an entirely new district. There are some challenges with opening up an existing district and also ensuring that if you were looking at maybe opening Cross Melville and expanding that, obviously the review of the heritage value and heritage attributes and the legislation in which it was first formed would be different. So the approach here is for an entirely new district that would be abutting the existing Cross Melville. And I will note one comment made actually by the local councillor is if this moves forward, a need to clearly distinguish in terms of what the name might be and also the messaging around it to ensure that people are aware that they're two different districts.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all I have.
Okay. If there's no other questions, may I have a mover and a seconder to receive the presentation?
I see Graham and Karen.
Okay. And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed?
Are we going to have a discussion or?
We'll have a discussion on the report. Yep. So no one opposed. That item is carried. We'll now move on to the report. So we have the report before us. May I have a mover and a seconder to just put the report on the floor?
I see Graham and Lynn.
Okay. And as we move on, is there any questions or comments in regards to the report? Go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment. Made some notes just to make sure I captured all. So the Melville Street Heritage Conservation District Study report dated March 2024, including the appendices, demonstrates to me that the research and work done by the report team was thorough and comprehensive. The resulting proposed area for the Heritage Conservation District clearly fits the OHA defined criteria, and the conclusion is considered and appropriate, including only areas that truly qualify for inclusion in such a heritage conservation district. And it is also appreciated by me that the tree cover mature vegetation was part of the research and project. As a long-term resident of Dundas, I agree with the conclusion of this report, specifically that the study area qualifies as a district appropriate for designation under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And I agree with the recommendation that the Heritage Conservation District Plan be developed and implemented for the area defined as option 1 in the report. So that's my one comment. And then the second comment that I have is around the dissolution of the Cross Melville Heritage Conservation District Advisory Committee. It appears acceptable to me because the oversight will still happen, just at a different committee. And that committee meets monthly, so there should be adequate coverage. And inclusion of the citizen member also ensures that there will be a voice for that area. So from my perspective, it seems fine. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
And that's, sorry, that is presented as I'm not sure if it has to be stated that it's a resident of Dundas who's saying that or a member of this committee. I'm not sure, but it goes for both.
You
so.
could be both. That's fine.
We work too much.
And also chair of the Heritage Group. Do we have any other questions or comments? Nothing? So if there's nothing, we have before us the list of recommendations, everything from A to I. If we have no other questions, or we've got our mover and seconder, we'll move to vote. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. All right, now we'll move on to our item 8.2 is the recommendation to designate 634 Rymal Road West in Hamilton under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, PED 24123 in Ward 14. So we have Scott Dickinson, Cultural Heritage Planning Technician, is here to give a presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is item 8.2, the recommendation to designate 634 Rymal Road West, known as the Union School Section Number 3. And I am Scott Dickinson, Cultural Heritage Planning Technician, for those of you listening in. There we go. This property is located on the northeastern corner of the intersection of Rymal Road West and Upper Paradise Road in the former township of Barton within the city of Hamilton. This property was requested by its then owner for designation in 2023 and was subsequently listed on the Municipal Heritage Register and added to staff's designation work plan as a low priority. In March of 2023, it was reprioritized for designation by January 1st, 2025. Staff have been in contact with the owner, who is still the same owner from 2023. They are still very interested in designation. They are very happy that this is going forward. They send their regrets they were unable to attend today's meeting. Staff recommend this property for designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, as it meets 5 of the 9 criteria laid out under Ontario Regulation 9-06. This one-story brick structure, which was constructed in 1927 with additions in 1954 and 1957, has design and physical value. It is a representative example of a rural one-room schoolhouse which displays Tudor Revival design influences. It is a largely intact example of a one-room schoolhouse, a relatively rare structure type in the city of Hamilton, particularly as it has not been extensively altered to accommodate a non-school use. The design value of this property is demonstrated by its exterior features, the one-story, one-room structure of the original 1927 school, the twin symmetrical projecting front entrances, one for male students, one for female students, with half timbering and gable eaves, the decorative brick parapet inscribed Union Number 3, ABG, 1927, the patterned brick infill, the metal and Georgian wire glass windows in the lower level, the 4/4 wood windows in the western wall, and the bell cupola. Its Tudor Revival influences are demonstrated in the original 1927 portion of the building and include, again, the decorative brick parapet with stone accents, the half timbering on the southern elevation with brick infill, and the half timbering in the gables on the original student entrances. This property also displays a high degree of craftsmanship through its decorative brick and stone parapet and the brickwork infill on the frontage of the building. This property also has historical value. It has direct associations with the Union School Section Number 3, which served portions of the townships of Barton, Ancaster, and Glanford. In 19th century Ontario, rural townships were divided into a number of school sections, with each section providing funds for a schoolhouse within that section. In many cases, settlement patterns did not conform to the surveyed township lines, so Union School sections, whose catchment area covered portions of several different townships, several different school sections, were common. Union School Section Number 3 covered the southwestern corner of Barton Township, the northwestern corner of Glanford Township, and the northeastern wedge of the triangular Ancaster Township. Reportedly, the earliest school on this site was in 1810 as a simple log cabin, which remained in use until 1859, when it was replaced by a frame building. In 1874, a brick schoolhouse replaced this frame building, and the land on which the school stood was purchased from Charles Reimel, who had been leasing the land to the school board previous to this. That original brick structure from 1874 was destroyed in a fire in 1920, and the current brick structure was its replacement, built in 1927, and later expanded in the mid-1950s as populations grew. By the late 1970s, however, the property was considered too small for further expansion, given the development of the area, and Union School Section Number 3 was closed by the school board. In 1983, long history. In 1983, this building was inhabited by the Paradise Children's Center, which is a daycare and preschool, so a separate educational facility, who ended up purchasing the property from the school board in 1991. Paradise Children's Center is still the owner today, and it is still operating a daycare and preschool in, well, this school. This property also has contextual value. It is visually and historically linked to the surrounding area, sited on its original location along the historic transportation corridor of Reimel Road. This property acts as a signpost demarcating the boundaries between the historic townships of Ancaster, Glanford, and Barton. Due to its size, its use of materials, and its architectural style, this is a very visually distinctive structure which differentiates it from the surrounding area. Being set well back on a prominent corner lot, this highly visible building is considered to be a local landmark. Those foregoing criteria are summarized here in this Statement of Cultural Heritage Value or Interest. The full version of this statement is, of course, found in Appendix B of the attached report. Also within Appendix B is a description of the heritage attributes which would be protected by a heritage bylaw if passed by council. To summarize, it includes the elevations and roof line of this one-story brick structure, including its T-shaped plan, its truncated hip roof, the central bell cupola, its brick facades, the brick bondwork in the central front facade with half timbering, its decorative brick parapet with a date stone reading Union Number 3, ABG 1927, the flanking covered porches with decorative brackets and stucco and half timbering in the gables, the paired wooden doors, the flat-headed window openings with stone lug sills, and the paired 4/4 hung windows on the western side elevation. Its key contextual attributes include its location fronting onto Reimel Road West with a deep setback from the public right-of-way and open views to the south elevation across the grassed front lawn. Staff recommend that the city clerk be directed to give notice of council's intention to designate this property as a property of cultural heritage value. Of course, we open it up to questions from the committee.
Do we have any questions? Go ahead, Graham.
Thank you once again for another fantastic presentation. I can understand what Karen said about hearing it in your voice as she read it. Actually, I have two questions, they're both minor in nature. Is there your research, did you find out any reason why it was built in Tudor style, which is very unusual for the city of Hamilton?
Through the chair, the Tudor revival was, of course, very popular in the 1920s as a house style, and also for large schools in urban areas, but usually those tended to resemble Tudor era country homes for nobility. Not so much the sort of half timber and brick, which is much more of a Tudor cottage, the sort of thing you would expect as a residential property. So it is a little unusual in that they chose the more cottagey Anne Hathaway Shakespearean end of the Tudor revival instead of, say, a large stone hall.
It's so unusual. I've always liked that building. And what does ABG stand for?
Oh, those are through the chair, the
thank you.
the initials of the 3 townships in which it served.
So easy once you hear it. Should have got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Do we have any other questions in regards to the presentation? If not, may I have a mover and a seconder to receive?
I see Graham and Karen.
And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed to receiving? Seeing none, that item is carried. Thank you, Scott. And we'll now move on to the report in regards to this presentation. We have before us the recommendations that Scott had shown on the screen. Are there any questions in regards to the report itself or the recommendations? Seeing none, may I have a mover and a seconder?
I see Karen and Lynn.
Okay. And as we move to vote on the report itself and the recommendations, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. And we move on to our consent items. So we have before us item 9.1, which is delegated approvals. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the consent items on?
I see Graham and Stefan.
Are there any questions in regards to these items? Go ahead, Graham.
Under the recommendation to extend the exhaust relocation, it was a long time ago that we approved this. And I'm wondering, what exactly is being done differently? Or are you just giving more time?
Through the chair to Graham. So yes, this original permit was from 2022, and my understanding is there's just been delays in terms of actually executing it, so not that anything has changed from the original proposal.
Any other questions? Seeing none, as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. Our next item is under discussions. We have 10.1 is the demolition of 318 Hess Street South, being a non-designated property listed on the Municipal Heritage Register, PED 24156 in Ward 2. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the report recommendations on the floor?
I see Andy and Karen.
Okay. Are there any questions? Go ahead, Graham.
Seeing as this beautiful cottage has already been demolished, is there anything that can be done to prevent this happening in the future? And what repercussions is there for the property owner for doing this without permission?
Through the chair, so in terms of the heritage side of things, I will note this property was being proposed to be recommended to be removed from the register. It was on the register. Although not required, my understanding is the original scope of work was an alteration, so they didn't need to consult with us formally. They had worked closely with our team in terms of what was originally understood to be a second-story addition. And had worked towards ensuring that the design of the consolidated building with the addition was sympathetic to the character of the area. This is in an area of a high concentration of listed properties. So we greatly appreciated that consultation and work. My understanding, as is noted in the staff report, there was then a disconnect between the original scope of work and the need to remove the ground floor in order to facilitate the second-story addition. Ultimately, the design of what's going to be built will look exactly the same, except the ground floor isn't going to be reclad anymore. So from our perspective, in addition to having worked with us on the design, although not legally required, and having coordinated at staff's recommendation, ensuring that any removed bricks were going to be salvaged, we were quite pleased with that consultation and work with us on that. In terms of repercussions on the building permit side of it, as is noted, the original building permit was revoked and they do have to obtain a new building permit for the demolition and new construction. So they are set back in terms of the timeline of that, needing to go through the approval process again. But at this point, there's no direction being taken in terms of formal action in terms of offense.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. We're moving on to item 13.1 is our buildings and landscapes. So if we could get a speakers list started for anyone that would like to give an update on a property. Lynn?
Yes, not an update through the chair. I would like to remove in under green, item 7, 340 Dundas Street, East Eager House, that is, as it is in the process of being designated.
So Lynn's put forward that recommendation. Is there a seconder?
I see Graham.
Okay. Before we vote, is there anyone that has any questions or comments about that? If not, as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item's carried, so we'll have that removed from our list. Any other updates, Lynn? No? Okay. Graham, you're next, and then I have Karen.
Okay, back to St. Giles. We've had some good news, some bad news. There's been another, I don't know if it was break-in or not, but the door was found open and trespassers on the property. The property owner has been informed and their representatives. Kindred Works has a new representative for the property. He seems pretty responsive, but I actually haven't seen anything done to the property yet in regards to his words. So hopefully one of these days the words and actions will both align. Try to keep it nice and neat and clean for the neighborhood. There's a little bit of trash and stuff building up, but at least they respond quickly.
Thank you, Graham. Karen, you're next.
Thank you. I have two updates, both in the section B, the landscapes and buildings yellow category. 3 Main Street in Dundas, the former Masonic Lodge. Just want to say that the new windows have been going in. Or maybe they'd started before, but they are looking absolutely beautiful. In fact, another resident of Dundas commented to me, "Did you see those new windows? It's looking so good." Hope that they get it up to the 3rd floor too, because there's some that are still boarded up there, and I'm sure that's part of the plan. That's coming along nicely, and ongoing construction. And then 2 King Street West, the former Majestic Theater, right, the Horn of Plenty, that building, which has been bought by Cumbraes. The windows are papered over right now, and it looks like there's work going on to develop that. There's a sign saying, I think it's opening soon. So that's good. That's coming along. Nothing visible from the outside that you can see. They, haven't changed any of that, which is good. And that's it for me. Thank you. Nothing else has changed in my property as far as I can tell.
Do we have any other updates for properties? I just will make an update for item 23 under properties of red, 120 Park Street North. They have finally, as of August 8th, the window openings that had been left open on the 2nd floor are now boarded up, so they're now covered. Any other property updates? Seeing none, may I have a mover and a seconder to receive those?
I see Graham and Karen.
And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. I'm going to pass chair over just quickly to Graham.
Okay.
Let's just
So Alyssa's going to provide an update.
Your mic's not on.
Thank you. Alyssa's going to give us an update on the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Recognition Awards and the call for nominations.
Just very briefly, I just wanted to remind everyone that the public call for nominations for Heritage Award properties is September 15th. So that will be before our next Municipal Heritage Committee meeting. So please get the word out to anyone that you know that might be interested in nominating a property. If any of our members themselves or members of staff, anyone that would like to, the easiest way is just to go through the city's website, our link for the Municipal Heritage Awards, and you can put your information right in there and do the nominations. All of those nominations will then go to the clerk's office, and then they get to the education working group so we can review them. So September 15th is the deadline for those public nominations. Okay.
Is there any questions from anyone? Elizabeth?
Through the chair, I just wanted to note the short URL for that is hamilton.ca/HMHC awards. And I could also put it up on the screen if folks want to take a look at how easy it is to submit their online nominations. Just one sec. So again, hamilton.ca/HMHC awards. and lots of great information on previous award winners. And here is the online nomination form. And all very straightforward in terms of just wanting to know who's nominated. You can select what category you're nominating for. There's more information on each of the categories on this site as well, and why you're nominating. And you can upload pictures and any research or other information you might have.
Thank you. And just for the public's good, is all the information for personal reasons redacted for people to see?
Through the chair, yes. I don't believe for public nominations, we even identify who the nominee is unless they're a participant. Maybe Alyssa can correct me.
There is space for the nominees to put their information in there, but they can also do it anonymously, I believe, too. It's not mandatory that they...
Thank you. I just want people to know that with the cyber event this year, we want them to know that we look after their privacy. Thank you. Are there any more questions from any committee members or staff? Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion to receive the update?
I see Karen and Lynn.
Okay, is anyone opposed? Seeing none, motion carries.
Thank you, Graham. So we're now up to any updates. Do staff have any updates that they wish? Is there any new information or updates that members? Go ahead, Graham.
Okay, I have two to bring up. I've know I mentioned to several people already. One of our former members had a medical event and is not feeling 100% right now, still in the hospital, but hopefully will be out soon. She's feeling really well, no permanent damage from the event. So that was really good news. I was talking to her today. She was bright and she was poking me on what stuff she wants me to do. So she's right back to normal. And last month we had a great event in Glanford that one of private citizens put on. Larry Smith, whose family owns O'Neill's farm equipment. There used to be an IH dealer, now a Case dealer. He's been involved with International Harvester and Case since the 1960s. The man has amassed tens of thousands, or thousands and thousands of items of memorabilia, ephemera, tractors, milkers, cream separators, spinning wheels, refrigerators, freezers, dehumidifiers, anything that was badged with International Harvester or Case, he has an example of, I'm sure. And he had an open house that was covered by Mark McNeil from the Hamilton Spectator, and it was published, and it was just a great day. Included were one-offs, the only only diesel-powered tractor built in Britain, shipped to Canada and under the IH badge, the first bulldozer that came off the line here in Hamilton. He has the punch clock, he has a floor medallion for one of the buildings torn down. It's just crazy what this man has. He had an open house and I passed it on. Hopefully people had a chance to go out and see it. If not, you missed a great day. It's his first time since the pandemic that he opened it up. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Graham. And in the Spectator, there was an article just recently about, so if you get a chance to go online, you can actually see some photos from his location, what he's amassed as a collection, and hear some interesting stories. So hopefully it's not his last open house. So, yeah. Great. Any other updates or? Oh, go ahead, Andy.
Through the chair, I'd just like to make a comment on a celebration that happened this weekend in Waterdown. It was the American House in, which is at the corner of Mill and 5, or Dundas Street. And they celebrated 200 years this year. It was built in 1824. They put on a great party. They closed off the parking lot. They had 9 bands from noon till 10, and hundreds of people showed up. And to me, it was a date worth celebrating 200 years of the American House. And I would like to put a huge thank you out to the Heritage community, including the Flamborough Archives and anyone else through staff or any individual that helped out research the history of the building. Because they put it out there on social media, and there was quite a bit of a response to give them a real good history of the 200 years, and one of the oldest buildings in Ontario, let alone Hamilton or Watertown. So I'd like to put a thank you out for everybody that contributed, and it was a great event. I went. I was down there actually for 8 hours. It was a lot of fun, and it was a date worth celebrating. Thank you.
They didn't get you in the dunk tank, did they, Andy?
They didn't.
No. They looked like they were having a good party when I was by.
It went for charity, though. They had a number of events like the dunk tank that went for animal adoption, and there was a Flamborough donkey rescue operation, and those funds went towards helping them, as well as the Hamilton Burlington SPCA as well. So. And it was a good celebration all around. It was well deserved for the owners that put it together. But like I said, I just wanted to thank the Heritage community and Lynn, your involvement as well. So thank you.
Oh, great reason to celebrate. No, that's great. Any other updates? So just before we head out, just want to thank staff for all of the research and all of the information that you put together and the reports that are coming forward. And please extend our thanks to the consultants for the report that they did for the Heritage Conservation District. That's a lot of work that we put into that. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive those updates? You don't need any. Okay. So just a mover and a seconder to adjourn today.
I see Graham and Andy.
And is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried, and we look forward. Our next meeting is scheduled for September 27th at 12 o'clock. All right. Well,
I'll be the last one.
oh,